I will call the meeting to order. I would recognize a motion to approve the minutes of the April 28, 2020 Oklahoma City Water Utilities Trust meeting. I would ask for someone to make the motion and someone to second.
We're doing it verbally or manually?
Any way you want to do it.
Trustee Greenwell, can you see your voting screen? Okay, good.
Yes, ma'am. And
It's been meeting and first and second, meeting and seconded, and it's been voted on. It's been approved. Moving into the consent docket.
No, just a second.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not able to vote.
Okay, did you press escape? Did you log into PrimeGov through Chrome?
Sorry.
Okay, we'll give you a minute. That's okay.
So Francis, I'm logged in, and I see the motion has been made and seconded, but I don't have a voting button.
That's mine as well.
Francis, I think it's the same thing I did this morning.
Let me try to log back in. It's not looking like it has been in the past, so I'm not sure. I'm gonna try and log back out.
Amy, are you there to help?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Laura and Jessica, have you hit the escape button and you're not viewing the Zoom meeting?
Okay, I just hit the escape button. I didn't know that was the magic trick.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Jessica, you logged back in?
I've logged back in.
And you've gone to the,
Yep, here it is.
I'm sorry?
I got it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So is everybody prepared? Okay, we'll move into the consent docket. There are a number of items in the consent docket. I would recognize a motion to approve them all, subject to individual consideration. Yay, we've got a yay. A second, we'll vote. Approved. Moving into the concurrence docket, I don't see any items on the concurrence docket unless someone from the floor has any. Seeing none, we'll move into items for individual consideration. And I'm going to read this first. Resolution directing the general manager or designee to approve additional work by its financial advisor and bond counsel to prepare all documents and provide all necessary services to facilitate the defeasance of its outstanding 2009 water and sewer revenue bonds, and then outstanding commercial paper loans through financial assistance programs loans provided by the Oklahoma Water Resources Board, directing the Oklahoma City Water Utilities Trust General Counsel to engage a tax and disclosure counsel to provide assistance, and authorizing the chairman or vice chairman in his absence to sign necessary financial assistance program loan applications with the Oklahoma Water Resource Board and execute the tax and disclosure council agreement. And I believe Brett Weingart will speak on this item.
Mr. Chairman and trustees, Aqua's financial advisor, PFM, has reported to us that the financial markets are currently very favorable for refinancing the 2009 bonds, and that we could get about $2.5 million of savings if we reissued the bonds with our own revenue bonds as we have traditionally done in the past. But we also met with the Water Board and looked at their programs and found that we could save $4.5 million if we use their program, and PFM recommends we proceed with that. Concurrent with that, we traditionally refinance outstanding commercial paper whenever we would do a refunding And we have about 37.6 million now outstanding of that. If we refinance that, we'll save about $2 million on that as well as far as long-term financing. Bond counsel recommends we get tax counsel to help with these matters and also have ongoing services for our commercial paper program. So the resolution provides the authorization for our assistant municipal counselor, which is the general counselor to the trust, to negotiate that agreement, and for the chairman to sign that agreement and the loan applications with the water board, and bring back resolutions to the trust and council for the resolution of intent at a future meeting for their consideration. These will provide significant savings to our customers in the reduction of long-term debt and fee help in future adjustments. I can answer any questions.
Are there any questions?
Brent, this is David Greenwell. I have a question. I'm in agreement with everything that's being suggested, but I have a question. When you first began discussing, you said that we could possibly save about $2 million by issuing bonds ourselves.
Right.
Or possibly $4 million if we go through the Oklahoma Water Resources Board. Now, I know it's a sensitive question, but are there any potential problems? And I guess what I'm actually saying is the Oklahoma Water Resources Board solvent, is it financially strong enough to where we wouldn't incur any potential problems by utilizing them to issue the bonds?
So what the water board does is they have a pre-funded loan program account, and they bundle the loan funds, and then they loan the money out to various water, wastewater utilities across the state. Mm-hmm. So what we would be doing is we would be paying money to the water board for the repayment of our loans, and then they would pay those loans off. We would have no responsibility for the state's OWRB's bonds. We would only have responsibility to pay our loans back to them. Mm-hmm. Now, the financial savings difference is because when you go to the water board, and we've talked about this before for the SRF loans, this one is just a little bit different, but it's another loan program they have. They don't require a bond reserve fund. So that additional savings from the 2.5 to the 4.5, that 2 million, is the fact that we would be able to take those bond reserves from the 2009 bonds and use them to lower the amount we would have to borrow to do the refunding. So it's like not having to have that escrow anymore, and being able to use that to lower your future borrowing for the refinancing.
Okay. So I don't understand completely all that, and that's okay. I don't need to try to understand it. It's just that through experience, there's always, you know, when there's a savings here, there's usually a cost, or, and when I use the term cost, additional risk or something associated with that savings. And I just want to hear from somebody that we don't think we're taking on any more additional risk by going that route, and it's just a pure win to us by doing it that way with no additional risk.
That's what we believe, that this was a safe way for us to borrow money.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? If not, we will vote. It's been moved and seconded. It's approved. Approved. Next item is the item. Are there any items from trustees? Seeing none, will be the general manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Status report, pretty simple. All the lakes are completely full. We've had kind of a wet year and we've been able to maintain high levels in the lake. The pro forma, as you can see in your packet, our expenses and revenues are about as expected through April. Now there is one thing that I need to update you on. We have discontinued our service disruption for non-payment. In March, mid-March, we started the process. In the last meeting, if you recall, we had about 8,000 or 9,000 accounts that were in arrears. Now we're up to about 10.5 thousand, but it seems to be stable. Now, the only thing not stable is they continue to be in arrears, so that amount is building. So right now, we're at about 3% bad debt. Normally, we're about 1% bad debt, but because we have been very conservative in our budgeting and our expenses for the year, we're still in good financial shape. So we're on target for expenses and revenues for the year. We anticipate that number growing any higher, the number of accounts outstanding. But that bad debt number is going to continue to increase as we go through time until folks start getting their jobs back. We do have some plans in place to try to seek funding from the feds. The mayor has sent a letter to our congressional group in Washington to ask them to consider funding to enable us to take some money and kind of clear the debt from those specific individuals who cannot pay their water accounts, so that we can continue to serve them after the moratorium expires. So we're working on a few things to help in that regard. And I just wanted to give you all an update of where we are, because I know there's some concern about the future financial status of the bad debt accounts. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Chris, I have a question on that. Are we working with individuals if they do call in and they say, well, perhaps my unemployment check has been delayed, or there's some other things that they're trying to get in the works to where we're actually doing something besides just cutting their water off?
Well, we're not turning their water off, and we are in communication with them, and we've asked some folks, but we've asked them all to set up a payment plan. Some can and some can't. But we intend to extend the payment plan for about 12 months after the moratorium has exhausted, because we know people are going to have a difficult time. So instead of the 2 or 3 months, we're going to try to give them at least 12 months if they'll work with us. Now, some of these folks have moved. We normally have 200 or 300 a day that we shut off within a day or two, unless they have moved and just didn't pay their bill. We restore service because we work out a payment plan with them, and we expect to continue to do that, but it'll be a little bit more a forgiving plan than we have had in the past, where we'll extend their payment plan out for 12 months instead of the typical 2 or 3.
Okay, thank you so much.
Chris, I've got a question. So just for clarification, are you saying that we're looking to see if the city's allotment from the CARES Act could be used to reimburse the Water's Utilities Trust for any bad debts that are incurred during this time?
We have asked that question too, Councilman.
Okay.
Let me interject there. This is Laura. That one thing for consideration when we talk about that is we're trying to come at it from the angle of, could the CARES money be used to forgive those individuals from the debt? And that's a small nuance to the utility, but it is important to the federal government that the money be used for individual relief and not necessarily for the relief of the utility and its revenues.
Okay, thank you, Laura.
At least the way that the act is written now.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Okay, So Chris, I've got one more question, and it's probably as naive as the one I asked a few months ago about how the water gets from one of the reservoirs to my home. But so in situations where we're full, that being the lake levels, the only way to avoid losing that excess water is to enlarge the reservoirs. Is that correct? I mean, it just overflows or it seeps away.
Well, on the Hefner and Overholser, let's take a look at the Northwestern reservoirs. That water actually comes down the Canadian River and it is diverted into the two water supplies. So if they're clear full, we just let the water just pass on by. Now on the south side, on the southeastern Oklahoma reservoir, so we pump from Atoka to Draper, and pumping about the same amount as we're using every day. So the lake's staying relatively full. McGee Creek at times has to release water. Well, they release some every day by contractual agreement, but they may release a little more. There have been times in the past where the lake was several feet above full pool, and they released that water. And so you are correct. We can only hold so much, and the only way we could hold more would be to enlarge those impoundments. But for now, that's just not a real practical thing to do. We just try to balance. If you remember, a couple of years ago, you all approved the lake balance plan, and we have been managing that lake balance plan to keep them all within a foot or two of one another throughout the year. So instead of filling them up in the winter and pumping them down in the summer and then trying to refill them in the winter, and if we get a dry winter, then we're at a challenging point in trying to keep them full. We're just trying to keep them as full as we can year round.
Great. One related question. Do we still use these water towers to store excess water? I know there's one in Ward 5 on Southwest 89th Street. At least the tower is still there. I don't know if it's being utilized or not.
We have water storage tanks throughout our system, and those water storage tanks are used to kind of dampen the impact of the use versus the demand. So if we just ran the system on pumps all the time, the water pressure would go up and down depending on the demand. So we use the storage tanks to help kind of dampen that, where we're not pumping all the time. We have storage there. In addition to that, it kind of helps us in an emergency as well. If we have an emergency, huge demand, and we're not trying to force water into a certain part of town and creating a shortage in other parts of town. So yes, we do use them, and we have a couple of dozen water storage tanks around town.
Well, do you continue to evaluate whether or not it makes sense to increase the number of those storage tanks, or is it pretty well decided we've got the appropriate number?
Well, we actually just built the system, and we continue to evaluate. And so, yes, sometimes we enlarge, sometimes we build new, depending on where the growth is, depending on where the demand is. So we're continually monitoring that, and we have plans to build additional storage tanks as the demand requires.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments from the members of the board? Are there any citizens to be heard? And if they are, they can press *6 to unmute themselves. Seeing none, I will call for an adjournment. Would there be a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. We'll vote. Don't have to vote. Just we are approved to retire for the trip. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Carl.